Hello, ladies and gents, and today I'm going to discuss my top five movies of all time when it comes to the horror genre. Now, there won't be any really slasher movies in this, just because, that they're not my cup of tea, if you will. They're not very good in my opinion, but it's for its own demographic and crowd. A lot of these movies are very experimental, and a lot of them have gotten a lot of recognition. A lot of them are cult-like, so let's get right into it. My fifth spot is probably 30 Days of Night, just because that's one of the first horror movies I've ever watched with my family. I remember watching it back in my old house, and it haunted me for years because the vampires look so disturbing and so vicious and so visceral and just malicious. They look relentless and just disgusting looking, and it's great. It's one of they truly look like bloodsuckers in the finest way possible, at its finest. And it depicts vampirism as well as, loneliness and isolation very well, because this takes place in the most northern American town in the world. So it's really cool. Alaska, it's really cool. And yeah, they depict it very well. And Josh Hartnett does a great job as protagonist who ends up preventing himself becoming into an antagonist, which is a pretty cool experience. I've never really seen that in a lot of movies where, the protagonist tries to prevent himself becoming evil. So that was pretty cool. Not to spoil anything, but it's pretty blatantly obvious, but it's still a really good movie. Even though I'm disappointed with the sequel, it doesn't exist in my eyes 'cause it's like a B-rated movie. But my fourth spot, I would say, is probably The Exorcist. That's another movie I recently watched. It's really good. It depicts, exorcisms very cool, even if it might not be as realistic to real life, but still really cool. And it's based off true events, even not like the event itself is not real, but it's based off like things from the 1940s, which is really neat. And I give him props for making a movie this well back in the 70s. It's ahead of its time. And yeah, that's all I have to really say when it comes to this particular movie. Now, my third spot is probably Eyes Wide Shut, which is controversial because many would not even consider this a horror movie, but I do because it's a swan song of Stanley Kubrick because he passed away in the production of this. And I think despite that, it's still they did a really good job with it. I think they depict and convey the message really well of sex cults and the possibility of these individuals in the sex cult having really large status and power, and it's really cool. And Tom Cruise, I love the character in it. He really is powerless throughout this movie, and it shows even though he's like a rich, wealthy doctor, he still can't do much because this cult is way too powerful, and he's way over his head in the movie because throughout the movie he's kind of questioning, should I commit this adultery? And he ends up not, thankfully, but he still thinks about it and questions it, which is in of itself very unfaithful to his wife, who is Nicole Kidman. And that's why this movie is even more eerie because this was a few years prior to Tom Cruise going on the whole, Scientology parade, and it just makes the movie even more disturbing. But I think my second place, I think it's probably going to go to 20 Days Later, despite the movie, the cinematography is awful because, they went for a style for a camera that looks like it was filmed in the 80s. Yeah, I think it does a great job of depicting loneliness, especially in the scene where he's like walking throughout the city, Cillian Murphy as Jim. Jim's walking throughout the city, and there's just nobody in sight. And I think that was cool, even though there were some minor mistakes. Like you can clearly see someone walking around in one scene with like far from Jim, but that's all right. That's like maybe that's a zombie stalking him or infected. Sorry, I mean infected. This technically isn't a zombie movie or whatever. The sequel isn't as good, but it still has good actors like Jeremy Renner and Idris Elba and Rose Byrne. Really solid movie. And John Carlyle, I think, or Robert Carlyle, my bad. He was supposed to actually be in the first movie as the general, but they ended up, having him casted in the sequel, which is really cool. And I think, like I said, the movie's really good. They depict the infected very well, but like I said, there are some minor setbacks. Like there is one scene of a field that's clearly a painting. Danny Boyle just made some questionable decisions in this movie, but still really good because, he's a director. He has a very wild filmography. Some of his movies are really good, and then some of them are just abhorrent, but, I still like the movie anyway. And I think my number one spot, oh, let's go to honorable mentions first. I think Hereditary deserves an honorable spot as well as Jaws, just because Jaws spawned the rated R movie, and I think it does it really well. The horror of, sharks. I think, they really depict a scary shark in that movie. And it has one of the best lines, "We need a bigger boat." Great movie. And what's not to love about that? As well as one other one, like I said, Hereditary. I think they depict a satanic cults very well, as it, or just any outlandish cults that are very demonic or very extreme very well, albeit, in a very ambiguous way. But there are some videos online you can find that have surfaced throughout the years that explain it more. But even despite that, on my watch, I didn't know anything about it, have any context, and it's still pretty cool. But my number one spot has to go to Obsession. I think the actors, Sam Neill and the wife, do a great, outstanding job. I've already talked about this in a full-fledged video, but I'll say some anyway. I think they did depict a disturbing, 1981 Berlin Wall style movie very well, because this was depicted before during the Cold War, the Soviet Union. So it was really cool. I think on the Western side, though, obviously, I don't think they would have filmed this disturbing movie on the Eastern side. They would have gotten banned by, the Soviet Union. But it's still a really good movie. This was before Sam Neill's big stardom, and he does a really good job. I think he's even in other horror movies. I watched him in Daybreaker with Ethan Hawke, and that was pretty good. But I'd definitely like to discover more of his movies because he is an underrated and overlooked actor. Just because he's in Jurassic Park doesn't mean he's like terrible, even though he does a good job there. And he's up there with the likes of like Sean Bean, I think, and even not Robert De Niro, but maybe like Ray Liotta. Rest in peace to him, by the way. But yeah, and yeah, it's just a great, outstanding movie. The wife, oh, her acting is just very disturbing, relentless. Her screeches and her screams. I mean, I can't imagine what she went through filming this, because I mean, she let out all that emotion, all that anguish, and all that just ugliness inside of someone. You know how like there's an ugly part of you on the inside you try to keep in? She releases all that shit. And expect the unexpected with this movie, because this movie's hard to watch. I mean, I don't even know where to start, because I mean they depict the divorce so well. It's one of the realest divorces I've ever seen in cinema, even though it has some unrealistic parts, some outlandish parts, if you will, that remind me of like Stephen King. But it's still, they do it really well. They do divorce very real and very, very well. And I just had shivers down my spine the whole time watching this. I mean, this movie moved me, and I might not be able to watch the movie again due to how disturbing this movie is. Because it's not a Hollywood movie, it's a foreign movie. You know how terrifying foreign horror movies are. I mean, I watched Ichi the Killer, and that was terrifying. Topic for another day, though. But yeah, that's my favorite movie, and I recently watched that, and I might watch that again, but it'll take a bit, just because it really moved me in a disturbing way. I watched this movie like at like 12 a.m., so bear in mind what I went through watching that. But yeah, I think that's my list. That about wraps it up. If you see an Obsession, let me know. I love talking about that movie, even though like I said, I made another video on it. But at least you have two videos to watch now when it comes to that particular film. And if you guys enjoyed this, let me know. And if you want me to rate an actual top five general movies of all time, let me know. Goodfellas will definitely be in there just because I love Ray Liotta and Robert De Niro. But enough digressing. See you guys later in another video. Peace out.